And what we talked about right here is so close to that, because you actually have gone and you've done research at the archives or through the internet or through materials that you've read, and so that you're putting those things together to come back and make a proposal, persuasive, descriptive, whatever.
Some people already did. Okay, so the next exercise, we're going to shift gears a little bit. The next exercise we're going to do is a photo exercise. And we're doing two things with this exercise. One is gathering a little bit of data to help us understand better how to use images well as we're teaching the civil rights movement. So that's where some of the demographic information at the top of this yellow sheet comes from. But we're also wanting to know, how to use photos better in the course of teaching the civil rights movement. So the instructions are, after you fill out the top part with the demographic information, is to think about preparing a unit about the civil rights movement for your students, whatever grade level you teach. You are to flip through here and select 5 photographs that you want to include that you think exemplify the major themes that you'll be presenting in your unit. Once you've completed your selections, then there's 4 questions to answer related to those 4 photographs. Okay. So first flip through and think about the 5 that you think you'd want to use as part of developing a unit in the civil rights movement. And then after you've selected those 5, go through and answer these 4 questions. And I'll be collecting this yellow sheet. Any questions about what you are to do? So first fill out the top part with the demographic information.
It's time for you to show us your understanding. Okay, that's when you are observed teaching. So we want to talk a little bit about how that what we've learned in putting this together. I'm going to pass out to you a version of a UBD unit. And let's talk about what these parts are. Okay. What I've done here is to take what we've done in the lessons since September and put those together to try to make sense of it to help us to understand what we've learned, how we got about to our understanding, and how we've gotten into the place that we have. And if you remember in our Understanding by Design unit that you have 3 parts. The first part is going to be your desired results. And what you're answering there is what is it you want students to know and be able to do. And what you're doing here is that we can write this up in several different ways. One of those is to do an essential question. And the essential question is designed to get to the heart of what you want students to know. Okay? It's also done where it would be a question that does not have one definite answer. It is a question that invites for inquiry, for discussion, to look at it from several different perspectives. And if it's done well, it should be one that is going to be more motivational. Okay? And what I've chosen, and there could be debate on these, and they think this actually answers 3 different ones. But remember, I'm writing this lesson plan as from us, and you're the students. Okay? So the 3 that most effective for students learning history? Just think for a second on how would you answer that question based on what you've seen, experienced. Done a little research, you listened to some personal perspective, you listened to some historians, you had some things you were supposed to read. We talked today about how we may take notes and how that we may summarize what we've learned. Then also, B, is how do we know what happened in the past? And one of the things that we tried to do through these workshops is to look at the fact that we think about this in terms of the fact that we have to look at what we have left, okay? The pictures, the documents, the letters, newspaper accounts. And then how can we legitimately, and what can we legitimately infer from artifacts? Which gets to be a little touchy. I wish Jim was in here because he would elaborate on this a little bit more for us too. But it depends on my perspective and how I'm looking at those artifacts and what I mean. I mean, when Janice gave you the pictures and you were making choices, it was so interesting to see which ones you were choosing and which ones you were throwing out. And you were doing that based on what you thought was important and the connections that you would make. And that's part of what we want students to understand is that historical perspective is actually based on what someone else thinks and it's based on how they experience and what they learned from that.
Well, just to add to that, I think Jim would say this, and it's certainly my experience, that when people do textbooks, they're doing a similar exercise, yes. Right? And sometimes it's based on a particular perspective on the textbook manufacturer, right? Sometimes it's the collective wisdom of a group of historians, right? But it's still the same kind of process that you just went through yourself, where you're making a judgment based on the story that you're trying to tell. So there's going to be some quote-unquote bias.
Right. And the same thing happened when we went to the archive. What you chose to even look and see was there was based on the things that you were already interested in, you heard about, you already knew about, you want to know something else. So once you did that, then you went back to see, okay, does that match up with what I thought? Okay. I remember you talking about the company and you couldn't find as much or what was happening there, but now you have a different interpretation based on what you know. Okay,
Nadine, when Pearson put together our new U.S. history textbook, they did the Mississippi edition and has Mississippi in black at the top of it. If you look in it, you'll see at the bottom of one of the pages my name. They asked me to look at the book before it came out to make sure that it was connected with Mississippi issues that could tie in to American history. So that's an example of what you're talking about, where Pearson came to myself and two other educators in Mississippi and said, make sure that this national standardized textbook has made connections into Mississippi.
I think for us, and you know this so very well, is that students think that that's just the gospel fact, okay? And so they just accept what you're saying. They never question it. And one of the things that we want to be able to do as educators is to get students to be able to think about this, or think about what somebody else is telling them and trying to make decisions about, is this really true? Is that the way this was? How did other people feel about this? What would be their perspective? And so that's some of what we were trying to do here. Remember, this is a unit plan that was written based on what we are trying to do with you. Okay, and so in our desired results, we first of all we have some essential questions. The second thing that we do is that we write those in understanding. Now, an understanding is kind of like the universal, or I don't want to say universal, it's the truth. It's the heart of the matter. It's what it is that we really want you to come away with understanding. And the argument could be made, well, you've written it down here. I've got it. No, if it's a true understanding, it means that you've got to actually experience it in several different ways before you really get it, okay? And so, as we've gone through this, we've given several different exercises for you to be able to experience this and be able to come away with this different perspective. A, small a, is that many instructional strategies are available for teaching history. An effective strategy have students engaged and thinking critically about the information. One of the reasons for using the Cornell notes is because rather than a passive process of just taking down what somebody says or copying notes off of a PowerPoint or just reading it from the book, is to have students to make decisions, think critically, make connections with that, stay focused on a certain topic. And so that's one of the things that we've done. The exercises that you've done where you've had to look at the pictures or you've had to pull things together from many different places, those would be effective strategies. History involves the interpretation of the artifacts. And as the exercise that Janice just did, it also makes a decision on which artifacts are you going to use. When you went to the archives, one of the things that you were doing was trying to pull together some materials that you would use in your class. Which ones did you choose? How are you going to use those? Are you going to tell students what those things mean, or is it left in any way for them to make that interpretation? And then C, historical interpretation is influenced by one's perspective. Where am I coming from? What did I know about this? What did my parents say about this? What do the people around me say? What have I heard from other situations? All of those things come into play when we look at those pieces and try to make a decision about that. Students don't always think about it that way. They're used to it being facts. Here it is. Learn this. Get it back to me on the test. And they don't realize that many times that those are left up for us to make some of those decisions. Okay, then we also break this down into knowledge and skill. And the question may be, why? What difference does it make? And the difference is that you teach knowledge one way and you teach skills in a different way. So what we need to do is to be able to look at what we want them to know and be able to do, and to separate those out so that we'll be able to teach those appropriately. One of the things that you will have on your test is that you will want them to know the perspective of many different people. I chose historians and participants of the Civil Rights era, the people that we've had speaking to us, participants both locally and nationally in the Civil Rights movement. Jim has helped us work through those. We've looked at them from several different places. We've seen what their ideas meant for Mississippi, what it meant for the nation, etc. And then we would also want them to know incidents, legislation, and court decisions that encouraged and continued the Civil Rights movement. All knowledge. Multiple choice test. Give it back to me kind of thing. Then there are skills that we want you to know. You had instruction on how to do an oral history interview. You conduct research for resources to use within the classroom. We've looked at museum exhibits so that you could create a museum exhibit, create a timeline for a topic, explain and use Cornell notes so that you can use those within your class, and develop writing prompts for assessment and enhanced learning. Those are the skills that we hope that you would come away with knowing. At this point, I feel like you've been exposed to them, but you got to practice it before you're really going to know it. And this is what we're asking you to show us when we come back for the assessment. Okay, stage. Well, let me stop. Questions? I got a few looks like, what are you talking about? Anybody brave enough to ask him?
Well, within the lessons that we create, you would like to see evidence.
Some of those.
Some of that.
Yes.
Okay.
When you are observed, it will only be a lesson. There's no way you can do all of those and do them well. Okay, so how will you show me your understanding? That's what the assessment is. How are you going to show me your understanding? Well, we have several different things. First of all, the performance assessment. Now, I want you to be very cautious. If you wrote up a unit and you gave this to someone to check, you wouldn't get a good grade with the way this is written here, because I need to have all the details about how to do the performance assessment. But one of our goals was that you were going to create a museum exhibit yourself to That's not gonna get to happen, is it? We're not gonna have, will they get a chance to, we don't have enough meetings for them to actually do that for us.
It could happen.
Okay, could happen, okay. A museum exhibit, okay? To write a unit plan using effective learning strategies to conduct a lesson using effective strategies, and you need to put a great big star by that one, because that one is, that's what we're looking for. A lesson using effective strategies. And a lesson fits in a unit. A series of lessons would be a unit. To develop a museum exhibit, or possibly a timeline for a topic using primary sources, photographs, letters, personal accounts, etc. Other assessments that we have built into this is to discuss with others and provide evidence of your oral history interview. Anybody conducted that yet?
I'm working on mine.
Good. Okay. We want to hear about it in February. Yes. Provide evidence of primary sources collected during research into archives. And I've noticed on DEBs that different people have theirs out. You haven't shown yet how you would use those, but you brought those resources. In February, we've got an incentive for those people to bring theirs and show what they've chosen and how they're going to use that. We have an extra gift for you. Right, Mike?
Yes, we do.
What are we?
In February.
No, it's not monetary.
Gift. In February.
If the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes. You are to bring the primary sources that you are going to use for a unit or have used for a unit and share with us what you're using, and we have an extra gift for you.
Really?
Yes.
When's that meeting?
February 8th.
February the 8th. February the 8th. Okay? Now,
That's it?
Yeah, February 8th is here on a Friday.
okay. Discuss and provide evidence of use with the primary sources collected. That's part of that. Discuss and provide evidence of use of Cornell notes or variations of it. Technically, I did that one today because you had yours. If I were teaching you this in a classroom, we'd do a lot more practice before we take that little bit of evidence. And provide evidence of writing prompts with used in the classroom, which is another thing that we need you to include and you can bring with you on February the 8th. It's the writing prompts that you use, and you may bring students' work to show how that's going to